let's say we wanted to come back again. I think if I'm not mistaken, it was us the fifth time. Is that after 8 years I'm here. Last year there was a word probably that's why he wasn't here. But it's really inspiring. The guys always want to be back, so it was really worth hearing, and we really thank for taking this time to be with us. Guys, I'm just going to give, I think, forgive me, just a 2-minute introduction over here. Some 21 years ago or so, I was a yeshiva student in Baltimore, Maryland, at NYSEV, and it's a longer story over there, but basically one Friday afternoon I was invited after a game of football to go to someone's home for Shabbat. It was Rabbi Fink who had invited me, and I was immediately struck, myself and my friend Steve Flowers that came with me on that particular Shabbat, was immediately struck by a person who was so thoughtful and so, not just thoughtful, although he is a thoughtful person, but what I mean is so thought out. Someone who was rarely put off by a question, rarely seemed like I could ask something that he hadn't considered before or tried to think about, and someone who always was looking first to show kindness to every single Jew that he met and every person that he met, which is how I ended up in his house on that particular Friday, and somebody who wanted to share answers, share ideas, share questions, and always through the lens of Torah and Mitzvot. I'll say this only slightly tongue-in-cheek. If there's one person who's responsible for me not being a rabbi, it's Rabbi Fink. I'll explain. When I was considering whether or not I wanted to pursue becoming a rabbi, which I was very much on the fence about, it was encounters such as my time that I spent with Rabbi Fink, and I should say with Rabbi Fink and with his entire family, his wife, his 7 children, the youngest of whom was a year old, not even a year old when I met her. Her husband is here joining us this evening. You guys know that I am particular not to be addressed as rabbi for 2 reasons. Number 1, I believe in all sincerity that I'm not worthy of the title. But number 2, I want you to realize such an important principle that taking Torah and Mitzvot seriously has nothing to do with whether or not you have a rabbi in front of your name. Rabbi Fink, who is a rabbi and does have smicha, but Rabbi Fink, aside from being a wonderful husband and a wonderful father for 7 children, and to how many grandchildren so far? 8 grandchildren, thank God. Rabbi Fink is somebody who is one of the most accomplished litigators in the state of Maryland and has been known as such already for decades. He's a person who sought out for his advice on legal matters, on marriage matters, on everything related to the community with which he's so involved. He's a person who embodies so much of the values that we try to inculcate from Torah and Mitzvot, and it is therefore my very, very great pleasure to invite him to speak this evening.
I steal a line from my father. I wish my mother was here to hear that introduction because she would have believed this. But I'll call him Rob. For Josh is not only, as I explained to several people, including my son-in-law recently, Josh is someone who's at times been my friend, my father. And sometimes we play golf together. Sometimes he's been my Talmud, and sometimes he's been my brother. A rare individual, and I encourage you all to continue to take advantage of everything he has to offer. My wife and I have been so to have hundreds of people come through our house for Shabbos meals from yeshiva and various other places, and most of them get married and move on with their lives, which is what they're supposed to do. But there's a handful who develop a special kesher to the family, and Rav Josh was one of those people, a very, very special, unique person. In any event, I encourage you all to ask questions when you have an opportunity, if you have a question you want to ask. I want to start off by sharing with you a very personal story that I haven't shared with anybody really, and I spoke at our Sameach this morning. I wouldn't share it there. I haven't shared it anywhere that I'm speaking, but I'm going to share it with you. I had a heart attack 3 years ago, and obviously when things like that happen, it changes your life to some extent. And the doctors told me, you can't do any trials for 3 months. Too stressful. And I said, doctors, for me a trial isn't stressful. That's like telling a fish he shouldn't swim. This is what I do. And they said, no, too stressful. Okay. So comes 2.5 months, and there's a very small hearing coming up. The difference between a hearing and a trial, there's no jury. It's a couple of witnesses. They tell their story, you cross-examine them. I said, there's a hearing coming up in a week. I can do a hearing. I can do that in my sleep. It's not stressful for me at all. And so the doctors gave me the green light. I could do this hearing, which would last 45 minutes. Okay. I go to the hearing, and there's somebody on the witness stand who is lying his pants off. And I had the goods on him. And I led him down the garden path and let him recite every lie that he was telling with all the splendor and grandeur that he was putting on. And I started asking him a few questions which let him know that I knew that he was lying, and his face turned white. And by the time I was finished, there was blood under the chair. And the judge basically sent him off the chair because it was so obvious that he was lying. And I came home and I told my wife, I'm a horrible person. Because I gotta tell you, I love doing that. I mean, when someone's lying in a courtroom and you slice him and chop him to bits, that's what he deserves. Now, am I a no-goodnik for feeling like that? Maybe. But I have to tell you, the reason I'm telling you this is because I've had a lot of success as a trial attorney. But first and foremost, I'm a Frum Jew. And I'm going to tell you one other thing on a personal basis. This is self-grandiosing, so it's not a problem. I can do that. Google reviews started becoming a big thing 10, 15 years ago. And originally they were getting a lot of peer-to-peer reviews. And perhaps the review I got, which I was most proud of, was 4 simple lines. It says, first of all, smart as a whip, knows the law, fights like a dog for his clients, and has such an impeccable reputation for honesty that the judges give him the benefit of every doubt. I can live with that. And that's something we're going to talk about a little bit today. Because whether you end up being someone who is learning for a long time, whether you end up being a doctor, whether you end up being a businessman, your tafkid here in the world is to be a Frum Jew. Being a Frum Jew has value. You don't realize it because, okay, we know a lot of Frum Jews, and some of them are doing more of the right thing, some of them doing less of the right thing. It's an incredible opportunity. There's a pasuk in Devarim which says that when the Jews are being matzliach, you know what the Goyim say? The Goyim say they're being matzliach because they're following God's commandments. Pasuk in Devarim. I'm not making this up. This isn't some obscure Rishon. A pasuk in Devarim. Amazingly, there's a second pasuk in Ha'azinu which says when the Jews are suffering, it says this in the Tochacha, it says, you know what the Goyim say then when the Jews are suffering? It says, because there is no God. It doesn't say not because they're not following the commandments, which would be the opposite. It says there's no God. It's a Musar Haskell. You have to understand that the Goyim see us. The Goyim see Hashem through us. That's their whole Havsaga of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They see how we act. They see whether we're being matzliach. They see how we conduct ourselves in business, in our professions, in our private lives, and that's how they view Hashem. You want 3 other proofs to this? I'll tell you. By the Egel Hazav, Moshe Rabbeinu appeals to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no, don't kill them. Why? Because what will the Mitzrim say? That you didn't really want to save them. You took them out of the Midbar, took them out of Mitzrayim to shech them in the Midbar. That's his plea. What are the Mitzrim going to say? And guess what? It was Matzliach. Hashem listened to that tefillah. By the Meraglim, again, Moshe Rabbeinu goes to be mispalo for the Am, and what does he say? The Umos Ha'olam are going to say you didn't have the power to bring them into Canaan, so you killed them in the Midbar. Again, he's Matzliach. This is a winning argument. Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu care what the Goyim think? I don't know, but he does. And we are the vehicle through which he sees, through which the Goyim see people. That's something that no matter where you are next week and in 2 decades, you have to keep first and foremost in your mind. I'm going to tell you some things now which were fairly controversial when I was in yeshiva. Forgive me if there's people here who come from a place that has taught them differently. I'm stuck on books, unfortunately. We call them the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch. A person has an absolute chiyuv d'oraisa to work to support his family. Period. I learned this when I was 20 years old, after being in many yeshivas where it never came up. Everybody's supposed to sit and learn forever. That's what I was taught. And when I was 20 years old, I just happened to be learning a sugya with somebody, and I stumbled across a halacha that said a person has an absolute chiyuv to support and work and support their family. And I was troubled by this because it was very different than what I've been taught many years. And that's when I decided, you know what? I'm going to get smicha. Because I want to know what Hashem expects from me, not what some Rebbe expects from me. Now again, Rebbeim are critical. And Baruch Hashem, you're blessed here with not just Josh, Rabbi Tessler. These are special people, okay? You don't understand because you're here, and it's normal that we take people for granted when A, we love them and we respect them. We think that it's normal that everybody's like them. It's not normal. You're in a special place. But understand first and foremost, people say that Sfardim tend to follow the Rambam more, Ashkenazim tend to follow the Shulchan Aruch more. The fact of the matter is that they're in perfect harmony 96% of the time. Small little differences separate the halachas of the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, and a lot of those show up in the minhagim. But understand the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch both say there is a chiyuv d'oraisa to work and support your family. Okay. How do you reconcile that with the idea of there's a mitzvah to learn Torah all the time? There's a machlokus what all the time means. Some say it means all the time. And some say it means any moment in the day you can be Makai in the mitzvah of learning Torah. That's where the idea of being Kovei Itim came from. It's different for every person. But let me share with you a couple of ideas. Most of you will probably end up working for a parnasa. I heard from someone just a perfect parable to this just yesterday. He said, Ben Gurion is really deserving of all the credit for people sitting and learning in Kollel. Not something you're going to hear many places. But the idea was that when Ben Gurion became the first prime minister of Israel, there was only several hundred people who were interested in learning. Most of the people here were very, very secular Jews. So Ben Gurion had no problem making a deal that these would be our holy people, those few hundred people. And no one had any idea that it was going to evolve into a mass portions of the population who either learn full-time for a living or they don't learn. They just come from families where they've been trained that it's usher to work. But in any event, Rav Asher Weiss said, you couldn't have this discussion 50 years ago because for the first 5,000 years of the world, if you didn't work, you died. It's that simple. We live in generations now of mass wealth. And by mass wealth, I mean that probably nobody here has ever had to worry that they would die of starvation by the end of the week. That is considered mass wealth compared to the 1600s, compared to many places in the 1800s. We live in times of bountiful, plentiful. There's a famous story in 1982. The head of Cuban counterintelligence was visiting Washington, D.C. to try to plead on behalf of his country. And he was talking about how poor people are in Cuba. And one of the American ambassadors said to him, we have poor people here too, but we don't resort to... And he goes, poor people? He says, America is the only country where the poor drive their cars to the protests. You have no idea what a land, what a time of bountiness we're living in. And you know what? With that comes its own challenges. It's very easy to get caught up and say, I've got to make tons of money. Sure, because the people making tons of money in America go to Hollywood, see all the kids that are committing suicide, see all the kids that have their brains run out on drugs. That's the product of having too much. But we live in an age where money is such a Yetzer Hara, and it has its own challenge that never before in history has any generation had these challenges. But nevertheless, you have a chiyuv to earn a parnasa. The Rambam says in 3 specific places in Hilchos Ishas, Perek Yud Beis, this is from a pasuk in Dvarim. This is not, again, some obscure drasha being made or a diak in a pasuk. From a pasuk in Mishpatim, the Rambam darshans that a man has 3 chiyuvim to his wife. One is to provide her with food. She has to have sustenance. Number 2, you have to provide her with clothing and with a place to live. And number 3 is intimacy, which covers not only physical intimacy, but more importantly, emotional intimacy. So when your wife comes home and she's in a bad mood or she needs someone to talk to her kindly and gently, this is part of what the Rambam shares as a husband's obligation. And by the way, I am quite sure that the reason the Rambam paints it like an obligation is because there are times when no matter what nashim sikanios you happen to be married to, a woman's mind will absolutely drive you bananas. They don't think like us. Nothing like us. I can't even tell you. It's madness sometimes. And the crazy thing is that they think that we're nuts. I'll just give you one example that I share with everybody. You know, I know the Shiva, the Rebbe, Mashki, everyone tells you should come and hear me speak. You know what? I don't know how much you're going to get out of it. But one of you, 2 of you, are going to call me up 5 years from now and thank me. All the rest of you are going to have it going through your head, boy, that guy was a lot smarter than he looked. I'm going to tell you one simple story. About 8 years ago, they were conducting scientific studies on the way men and women think and how they differ and how they think alike. And they asked men, name the 3 biggest stresses in your life. And the men, they all start naming, well, their job and their parnasa and all the different pressures that men have. And they hooked all the men up and all the women up to all types of medical devices that could measure physiological changes in the body. Your heart rate, your respiration, everything that you could measure with a machine, they hooked them up to. And the men start talking about the stresses in their life. And guess what happened? Their heart rate goes up. Their blood pressure goes up. The more they talked about what was stressing them, the more the machine said this person is under stress. They then asked the 500 women, tell us what stresses you. And the women talked about the relationships and they worry about their kids and all the things that women worry about. And guess what happened when the women talked about what stressed them? Their blood pressure went down. Their heart rate went down. Their pulse went down. Everything showed that the more the women talked about what was bothering them, the better they felt. Really? Most men will find that whether it's playing ball, reading a book, learning Torah, playing a video game, men have escapes. For some men, it's learning a Gemara because they excel at it, and when they learn Gemara, it takes their mind off of everything. But men have escapes. They have a term for it, they call it man caves. A room that somebody has, he's not a Talmid Chacham, he's not someone who learns regularly, and he goes in, he watches a movie with surround sound and all this kind of stuff. He's got his man cave. And why do men have these things? Because when a man is under stress, he has 2 options. Number 1, I fix the problem. If I can't fix the problem, I got to forget the problem. Because the last thing that 99% of all men want to do is dwell on their problems. You know why? Because they'll make us feel good. Our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure, everything goes up. This is one of the proofs that God has a sense of humor. Because he created this creature called a woman who loves to talk about things that are stressing her. So when inevitably there's stress in the marriage, the little Johnny brought home a D on his report card, or my daughter is wearing socks that aren't really as high up as I think they should be, and there's natural stresses that are going to come up in a marriage setting. And what does the husband say? Okay, listen, either we'll deal with it like this or just let the mind play it out. And the wife then says, no, we have to talk about this, honey. Let's make these people live together who handle stress, and they're pre-programmed to handle stress in diametrically opposed ways. Says the Rambam, part of your obligation of intimacy to your wife is to put up with people who think like this. Who wants to do? And the worst thing is, if you don't know that this is the way women think, not only do you not understand why they want to dwell on what's bothering them, you think they're trying to kill you. Because they're insisting that you do things that make your blood pressure go up, and make your heart rate go up, and make you feel sick. So, whether you want to take my email or my phone number and thank me for this little piece of knowledge a few years down the road, I'm very happy to take it. But it's an important lesson for Shalom Bayis. When I deal with young couples, this is one of the most crucial, critical issues. Women and men do not understand that they need to communicate with each other and understand that what drives her crazy makes me feel good. And what makes me crazy makes her feel good. And there's a compromise. You have to listen, you have to try to understand where they're coming from. Okay, so we have these two conflicting ideas. Number one is that we have a chiyuv to earn a parnasa and support our families. Number two, there's a mitzvah to learn. All the time there's a mitzvah to learn. Those things just seem to be in conflict. I can't go to work all day and be learning all day. I can't do both. But maybe you can. Because there's another core thing that many of you have not learned. There's a Rashi in Bechukosai, one of the first psukim, I think. It's either the first Rashi, second Rashi, but it's on the first pasuk in Bechukosai. And you all know the pasuk in Bechukosai Telechu, Sosai Tishmaru, Vasisim Osam. Should listen to my halachos and do my mitzvahs. And Rashi says, listen to this because you may never have heard it before. In some places it's considered madness. Rashi, you know the radical that Rashi was. Rashi says the reason we learn Torah is so we know how to do the mitzvahs. Really? I was always taught we learn Torah because we want to learn Torah. It's a mitzvah to learn Torah, period. That's the end all be all. You learn Torah to learn Torah. You know, Rashi was that, liberal guy. Rashi says, no. We learn Torah so we know how to do the mitzvahs. And guess what happens if you do the mitzvahs? Hashem tells you. He doesn't promise you Olam Haba. That's in a different pasuk. Hashem promises you that you'll have beautiful families, you'll have beautiful homes, you'll have peace in the land. The bracha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you for following the mitzvahs is Olam Hazeh. You should have a beautiful life here in Olam Hazeh. How do you do that? I'd say listening to Rashi is a good start. You do the mitzvahs, you do them properly, and whether you're a lawyer, or whether you're a doctor, or whether you're a businessman, or whether you're a Rosh Yeshiva, you are being measured by how you do Hashem's mitzvahs. The Goyim may not know all Taryag mitzvahs, but they know that when a Yid ends up on the front page of the New York Times for embezzlement, they know it's one of God's people doing the wrong thing. And believe it or not, when Arab sheiks come to New York so that Dr. Goldman can fix their eyesight, they know that it's a Jew who's a gifted surgeon. I have several great Mechutana. My son-in-law David is here. His father's a great man. Works in real estate and venture capitalism. And if you ask anyone in the entire city of Baltimore, they will say that David's father and all of his partners are known for being Erlich. Which you can't say about everybody. People are hesitant to do business with people because they don't know if someone's trying to rip them off. There is perhaps no greater Kiddush Hashem than having Goyim say that he's Erlich. I have another Mechutton. He's a physician. He's renowned because his door is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and people come in with their child with the broken arm who's bleeding, who needs stitches, and he takes care of them right in his living room. My Mechutton was my Chavrusa for 5 years also. We saw everything under the sun. Someone comes into the shul, the Beis Medrash, his house, my house, whatever problem it is, and he takes care of them right on the spot. There have been many times that outside of his working hours, he's been written up in the New York Times and the Washington Post for saving people's lives on the airline when they had a heart attack, when they went unconscious, when he had to give them resuscitation or how to get them to the hospital in a conscious state. All types of stories about people's lives that he saved. And whenever these are brought to his attention, because he never brings it up, he pretends they didn't happen, but sometimes they're reported on. Say, oh, I just read an article about you saved. He goes, I'm just a shliach. That's what he always says. I'm just a shliach. He takes no ownership over it. He doesn't claim that he did it. As a matter of fact, there's a big story about 2 years ago. I don't know if you heard it, David. He resuscitated someone who wasn't breathing for 19 minutes. It's a medical, physical impossibility. Can't be done. At 8 minutes, you have permanent brain damage. The brain shuts off. It's over. He would not give up. He kept performing life-saving CPR on this person, and at 19 minutes they regain consciousness. That's how dedicated he is to the Chaim, to the beauty that human life represents. And if you don't think that people see him walking around the emergency room with his yarmulke on, and people don't say about him, that's the way a Jew behaves, you're mistaken. That's what they all say. It's what they all say. And everybody in this room, I'm going to tell you something else. I think I've met 2 or 3 of you in the past. 2 or 3. Most of you I don't know. But I'm going to tell you something about yourselves that you don't know yet. I teach in a lot of places, and the first thing I teach when I'm teaching Frum people is, you don't realize that you all are part of the top 1% of the population. You know why? Because he thinks he's an average guy. I'm one of the regular guys here. And he's comparing himself to him and him and him and him and him and him and him. And here, I'm an average guy. Compared to the average person on the street, you're in the top 1% of everything. Everything. And when you go out into the world where there's Goyim in the world, and they see you, they all recognize that you're special. And I will tell you right now, we got 30 people here? The average of 30 people is that 2 or 3 of them will perhaps do something extraordinary in their life. Of the 30 people, 25 of them will live average, normal lives, and 2 of them will be criminals. That's the general graph when you look at any 30 random people who grew up in America. I'm telling you right now that the normality in the Orthodox Jewish community is that 20 of the 30 of you are going to do extraordinary things. Extraordinary. And 10 will just be average. Average by our standards, not by the Goyim standards. Everybody in this room is extraordinary. Not everybody's as driven, and one guy might succeed in this or succeed in that, and another person might say, listen, Diana, I have enough. And that's not very good. But don't think for a second that anybody here is normal. None of you are normal. You're all extraordinary. And you all outperform your Goyish counterparts by a factor of 20, a factor of 30. I'll show you one thing to back this up. Did you know, do you care, that since 1900, 25% of all Nobel Prizes have been won by Jews? Jews represent 0.2% of the world population. 0.2%, and they're winning 25% of the Nobel Prizes. That's mathematically an impossibility. And by the way, the Nobel Prize people are known for hating Jews. How does that happen? So the first answer that an anti-Jew will give you is they'll say, well, Jews have been creatures of privilege. They have disproportionate wealth and they're in positions of power. Of course, they forget that since 1900 we had that little thing called a Holocaust, where they used to bake our people. And then many years after that, you weren't allowed to go to school. Even in America, people think America was so great until the recent spat of anti-Semitism, which they thought was new. It's not so new. In the 1950s, all the comedians, entertainers who wanted to go to Hollywood and were Jewish, they all had to change their names. You couldn't get a job in Hollywood if you were Jewish. There was no Isaac Katzenberg and Geffen and Spielberg. If you had a name like that, you weren't getting a job in Hollywood. It wasn't until the 60s and all the nonsense that came with it that they considered Jews to be somewhat palatable. Nothing but anti-Semitism in America all the way until 1960. Jews had no opportunities there. And they're winning 25% of Nobel Prizes. You have to, and I'm not saying winning a Nobel Prize is the goal or the be-all and all that, but the fact of the matter is you have to recognize when you look in the mirror that every person here has incredible potential to make a very big difference in the world. Whether it's in the field of medicine, whether it's in the field of education and you're a Rebbe, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is outperforming everybody else and making a difference in everybody's lives. And letting people see that this is one of Hashem's people. So you want to know how to make a difference? You want to know how to balance between being a Frum Jew and learning Torah and doing a profession and supporting your family? That's the answer. Learn Torah, K'dei Lasos mitzvahs, so I know how to do the mitzvahs properly. Let someone see that when you're taking a break for 5 minutes in the middle of your workday for lunch, that you bench and say Birkat Hamazon. You have no idea what an impact that makes on Goyim. When they see you take 5 minutes out of your lunch break to say Birkat Hamazon. That's not a tall ask. It's not asking someone to give up a quarter of their fortune. 5 minutes to bench so a guy sees that being Maker Tov to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for having mazonos is a madrega. Let them see that that's something that's important to you. When you save a life, you're not looking for the credit, but I'm just the shliach. When someone talks about how you conduct yourself in business, he's erlich. That is a Kiddush Hashem. We play it down a little bit because there's one reference in Halacha in a Gemara that says, really you can only make a Kiddush and Chil Hashem to other Jews. It's taken completely out of context. The fact of the matter is, and you can call me on it, the fact of the matter is you can make a Kiddush Hashem and a Chil Hashem to Goyim readily. And every person here is going to have that opportunity. Whether it's in work, whether you take your child to a pediatrician, no matter what, there's going to be times when you're interacting substantively with Goyim. And they will see how you act. They will see how you conduct yourselves. And those are opportunities you have every day. Let me share, am I okay on time? Many of you people are probably familiar with the Rambam and many of his precepts, but perhaps the core principle of the Rambam is something called the Shlil Hazara. The Rambam talks about the middle path of how to conduct yourself. The Rambam says very specifically, you shouldn't be too generous, because if you give all your money away, you're not going to have food to eat tomorrow. You can't be too generous. You also shouldn't be so cheap. Now, when Hashem's granted you a parnasa, that you should hold back from giving to others because you're afraid you won't have enough, but rather you have to be somewhere in the middle. The Rambam says this midah of baininess applies to every midah, even jealousy, kina. The Rambam says has a positive role. If you're jealous of someone's Torah, or if you're jealous of the mitzvahs and the way they conduct themselves, it's okay to have kina there. The Rambam says this about many things, even in the way the food you eat. Everything you should have a middle path, moderation, not too much, not too little. And he says if you find yourself lacking in one area, you try to drag yourself back to the middle by overcompensating a little bit, with one exception. The Rambam says there's one exception to this rule of having every midah baininess. The Rambam says you should never have the midah of ka'as. You should never be angry. That's a hard sell. There's things that are worth getting angry about. But the Rambam goes on to say, as he always does, he says, when someone's angry, they say things they don't mean. They act in a way they don't mean, and they can't take it back. And nothing productive comes out of it. He says, anger serves no purpose. You do whatever you can to eradicate it from your life. That precept is true about everything in your life, including parnasa, including limud Torah. You cannot learn Torah to the point where your family doesn't have food to eat. And by the same token, you can't work to the point where you have no time for your family. Your children need you at home. They need you to have an impact on them. Your wife not only needs you to be home, your wife is entitled under halacha that you pay attention to her and be sensitive to her, even when she's irrational. That's a halacha, and that's part of the Rambam's midas baininess. You have to be in the middle. You have to constantly be rebalancing yourself so that there's time for your family, there's time for your children, there's time for your wife, and there's time for learning Torah. Some people talk about kovei itim. I'm not a big fan of the term. Kovei itim, for those who aren't aware, usually means having a certain amount of time set aside each day for learning Torah. I get that works for many people. For many people, I've seen people become Gemara scholars by doing Daf Yomi. I could never do Daf Yomi, because when I learn a Gemara, I don't want to have my appetite wet. I want to get into it. I want to get deep into it. And I found it was very superficial learning, and it didn't satisfy me. But I understand there's many people. I was learning Kutshim for the first time with one of my Mechutanim 6 or 7 years ago. And we're coming across a very obscure Gemara in Chulin, and I didn't understand it. I mean, I knew what the word said, but it didn't make any sense to me. As a matter of fact, the Gemara was about the shmiras that they have for the Beis Hamikdash, and then each coin is assigned to a particular shmirah, and they rotate whatever. And the Gemara says a crazy idea that if they didn't have enough kohanim to do the avoda, before they would go and get someone from a separate rotation on a different shmirah, they would use a tamei kohen in the Beis Hamikdash. What, are you kidding me? You're so attached to your shmiras that you're going to let a kohen who's tamei be in the Beis Hamikdash as opposed to getting a tahar one from a different group? You're out of your mind. And I couldn't understand this Gemara. So I happened to be at a chassan, and someone told me there's a guy there named Real Brown. His father was my Rosh Yeshiva many years ago, and he's an Eloi, knows every Gemara, and knows everything under the sun. He's a Rosh Yeshiva in New Jersey now. But anyway, I went up to him and asked him, an obscure Gemara in Chulin. And he said, no. He says, a Shmirah was not just some custom that the Kohanim divvied up and said, you have the first ship, I have the second ship. The Shmirahs were part of the Torah Sheba'al Peh. It's part of the halachas that was handed down to us of how you have to do the avodah. It's central to doing the avodah. I never knew this. To him, it's Dover Pasha. And again, there are people like that, maybe not on his madrega, that are becoming absolutely super Jews by doing Daf Yomi. It's amazing to me. Take Joe Average. The guy cuts lawns for a living. Makes himself a good parnasa. He owns a bunch of big lawnmowers and a bunch of big yard equipment. And this guy goes to Daf Yomi every day. And you ask him about any Gemara anywhere, and he's familiar with it. He may not be able to give a shir on it, but he's familiar with it. Where does the Gemara talk about X, Y, and Z? He knows it. That's an amazing thing, that we have what we used to call a Pashut Yid. Someone who's Shomer Shabbos, Shomer Torah mitzvahs, can now be a Bucky in Shas on at least a B'kiyas level. That's an amazing thing. And it just comes from being in Daf Yomi. Like I said, never worked for me. I always had to learn with the Chavrusa. But maybe it's a chazar with me, but that's it. You have to understand what works for you. I'm not a big subscriber to Kaveh Itim. It's an important thing as a minimum. But you know what? My Chavrusa for many years was an emergency room physician. And we compared our schedules every Sunday morning. What is your shifts this week? When do you have trials this week? Okay, Monday we'll learn at 4:30 p.m. Tuesday we're going to learn at 7 o'clock a.m. Whenever the schedules matched up so we had time. That worked for me. But that's the point. You have to find out when each day is going to be the time for your kids. When is going to be the time for your wife and your home? And what is going to be the time to spend in learning? Because you have to spend time in learning. And when you spend time in learning, I got news for you. There was a time, maybe again 50 years ago, when people went to their Rav and asked them basic shilas of kashrus and hilchos Shabbos. There's no excuse for anyone to have to call a Rav now, except for very rare situations. Whether you're fluent in Hebrew or whether you only speak English, there are svarim you can learn that will make you proficient in hilchos Shabbos and hilchos kashrus. It doesn't mean there won't be an unusual situation that comes up that you may have to ask a Rav about in a posek, but there's no excuse for anybody in here being an Amaretz. I'm sorry. Whatever you're going to do for your Kaveh Itim or for your learning in the day, at a very minimum, make sure you take 3 months to read an English book put out by various authors and be proficient in the halachas of kashrus and the halachas of Shabbos at a bare minimum. Like Rashi says, we learn Torah so we know how to do the mitzvahs. I got news for you. If you know how to do the mitzvahs, you're ahead of the game. You'll be able to make a Kiddush Hashem on a daily basis, even if you don't realize it. And I'll tell you one last thing, and then I'll open up to questions. There was a famous story, you may have heard it. The Gra, the Vilna Gaon, perhaps the greatest Torah genius in the last few hundred years. The Gra was said was permitted to argue on Rishonim, even though he was hundreds of years after them. A brilliant mind who devoted his life solely to Torah. And there was one time that the Dubna Maggid, you all know the Dubna Maggid was the person who could come and be the traveling Maggid, and he could give a parable to any situation. And the Gra sent a message that I want the Dubna Maggid to visit me when he's visiting in town, because he heard he was coming to speak in Vilna. So the Dubna Maggid, of course, the Gadol Hadar says he wants you to come. He came. And the Gra said, I want you to give me Musar. And the Dubna Maggid said, the Gadol Hadar, I don't pretend to hold a candle to your shoestrings. I'm going to give you Musar. He said, I want you to give me Musar. He said, I can't give you Musar. He says, if you really believe that I'm the Gadol Hadar, then you should listen to me and give me Musar. So the Dubna Maggid thinks for a second and he says, you know, everyone knows that you're the greatest Torah scholar in 6 generations. But you sit here in your home studying Torah all day. You don't teach Talmidim. It's not right. And the Vilna Gaon broke down and started crying. Because the Musar was an emes. The Vilna Gaon was the greatest man, the greatest Talmid Chacham in the last 500 years. But he didn't have yeshivas. He didn't have Talmidim. He sat in his home and learned every single day, 20 hours. Famous story with the Gra, his sister, who he hadn't seen in 21 years, came to visit him. Long trek from some other part of Russia. She wanted to visit her brother. The Gra is about 62 years old at the time. She knocks on the door. The Gra gets up and opens the door. Doesn't know she's coming. He recognizes her immediately. And she says, Shalom, and they start talking. And after about 40 seconds, the Gra interrupts her and says, Vela, you may have noticed that my hair is turning white. And, and she goes, yeah, we all get old. It happens. He goes, you don't understand. It means I'm running out of time. I can't sit here and schmooze with you. And he went back to his Gemara after spending 4 minutes with her. I'm not encouraging this of anybody. Understand the type of person that Gra was. He learned all day long, interrupting himself for the minimum time that he needed to eat and drink and take care of his physicality. That's it. He didn't have Talmidim. He didn't take time out of his own life to teach Talmidim. We have Baruch Hashem Hiskarim that teach us many things. But that was the Musar that the Maggid gave him. All of you can understand this idea. The idea that we have a chiyuv to give of ourselves to others. One of you here might be great at engineering. You might be able to build things, fix things. One of you might be really good at thinking things and trying to solve problems in another way. Someone else may be someone who could be a great tutor and help young children who don't know how to do math. Everybody has special skills. And I'm going to throw down the gauntlet right now. I want each of you, when you get ready for bed tonight, I want you to look in the mirror for 3 minutes. 3 minutes! It only takes 20 seconds to say you look great. I want you to take 3 minutes, not to say anything out loud, but to think to yourself, what do I excel in? Everybody in this room excels at something. It doesn't mean you're the best in the world. It means you're better than most people. You have a chiyuv to use those talents to help the tzibur. When people see you helping people, they understand what it means to be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim. Hashem didn't give you the talent to play a violin because he wants you to stick it in a drawer. You lead a concert. You show people what it means to inspire people at a kumsitz or whatever it is. Use your talents that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you. Hashem did not make you a person with talents so you could stick them in a drawer and waste them. And always understand the idea is to have this balance. Just the last thing and then we'll open to questions. The idea that we do learning when we're young, like you're doing now, where we learn Gemara, basically to the exclusion of everything else, is for one particular purpose. Because you can memorize halachas of Basar V'Chalav and Shabbos and all things like that, and when a new situation comes up, you don't know how to apply it. Rav Moshe Feinstein wrote many tshuvas on modern medicine, like in vitro fertilization. They didn't have such things to discuss in the time of the Shulchan Aruch. And Rav Moshe, because he was such a baki in Gemara, knew how to apply the Skaras and the Gemaras to give us applications like that. That's why you're learning here and spending so much time learning Gemara, so that you know how to think, you know how to apply these things to different situations. By all means, consult a Rav when you're not sure, but make sure you're proficient in Basar V'Chalav, make sure you're proficient in Shabbos, and use the talents that Hashem gave you to be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim. And you do that by being a good person. It's not a coincidence that there's more mitzvahs than the Torah, than anything else. Treat each other with respect. Treat each other properly. Appreciate what someone else brings to the table, even if it's different than what you have. Okay, any questions? Good, let's go home. Yeah.
So the reason why we learn is to do the mitzvah?
This is what Rashi says. I don't pretend to know better.
Is there other opinions of why we learn?
I haven't seen it.
Meaning...
there are modern opinions that are different.
Like, what about learning something that doesn't apply anymore?
Well, so there's many Gemaras that talk about we learn the Shem Shemayim. Every learning has value because we can apply it and learn from it to learn in different situations. I'll give you one example to answer that question. You all have heard of Rav Yitzchak Radowitz? Big Talmud Chacham, one of the finest men on the planet right now. And I have this chus to teach with him once or twice a year. He was actually my law professor 40 years ago. And then he went into learning full-time again after being a graduate from Harvard. And we ended up on the same panel trying to deal with the Iguna problem in America about 30 years ago. We didn't get very far, but we all had different ideas. But anyway, if you listen to any of Rabbi Bradowitz's shiurim up till 10 years ago, and you ask him any question, you would see, he'll tell you the Rambam says this, the Shulchan Aruch says this, the Aruch HaShulchan says this, the Noda B'Yehuda to give you 100 different halachic holdings of the idea. And that's what you got. You asked him what did he think? Oh, nothing. Listen to the Noda B'Yehuda. It doesn't matter what Rav Yitzchak Breitowitz thinks. Baruch Hashem, in the last 6 or 7 years, he now will tell you at the end, I lean a little bit more this way. I think he's been forced to recognize that as one of the Gedolei Hadar. He's accepted it very reluctantly, but he'll now sometimes give you his opinion after he recites all the others. So I often listen to what he calls his Q&As. He has sessions with the public where people fire every question at him, ranging from abortion to COVID-19 restriction. It doesn't matter. Nothing's off limits. People ask him and he answers. And I finished listening to one of his shiurim, and I said to my wife, this was a good day. I got every answer the same that he did. And guess what? I don't know a fraction of what he knows. But there comes a point when you've learned a certain amount of Torah, and you know a certain amount of halacha, that you realize there's 4 or 5 guiding principles in everything we do. And if you follow those 4 or 5 Greek guiding principles, you're going to be okay 98% of the time. Learn what it means to be a Talmid Chacham. It doesn't just mean knowing how to touch up a machlokas between the Rosh and Tosfos. It means understanding what it means to be able to apply these halachas to everyday life. To understanding the challenges come up with your wife and your children about how to maintain shalom bayis, and how to understand that you may have a child that looks exactly like you, but has the skills of his maternal grandmother. And don't make the mistake of trying to make children into little versions of yourself, because they're not. They have their own talents, their own abilities, and you have to help them do the same thing. To grow and be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim, the gifts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave. Yeah, anything else? Yes?
What are those guiding principles?
So it's hard to put a finger on any one of them. Obviously, it starts with chesed. It absolutely starts with chesed. And I would say, aside from chesed, I'd say honesty is probably the second principle, which is almost always unbreakable. Are you permitted to lie sometimes?
Yes.
Good for you. Most women say no. The fact of the matter is, we know from Avram Avinu, we know from Hashem telling him, not mixing the words that Sarah said a little bit, that for the sake of shalom bayis, you can lie. I'm not telling you to go to the casino and tell your wife you're in the base medrash. That's not telling you to shalom bayis. But there's a point where when your grandmother, who's 90 years old, comes down the steps getting ready for her great-granddaughter's chasana, and says, and she's wearing enough makeup that she looks like Bozo the Clown, and she says, how do I look? On my cheshbon, you tell her she looks beautiful. It's okay. It's okay. So I'd say emes, I would say chesed. Those are the 2 most core principles. And number 3 is this balance between chas v'shalom, chil Hashem, and kiddush Hashem. Your mission here is to make a kiddush Hashem. Every moment of your working day, every moment of your learning. That's the time. I often joke with people, if I lived in Eretz Yisrael full time, I'd probably live in Tzfat. Because Tzfat is really the only place you can find a guy with a long white beard giving shiurim on a stoop wearing a Mickey Mouse t-shirt. That's me. I'm a Leitz. What can I tell you? I'm a beach bum. But I love Torah and I love what it's done for my life. And I realize when Hashem tells me, if you want to have a good Olam Hazeh, listen to my mitzvahs. Follow these precepts and you're almost never going to go wrong. You're almost never going to go wrong. Anything else? Josh, do we have more time for anything? Are we finished?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where does enjoyment come? Like, where does it fit? Like playing sports or watching a movie or things like that.
So again, there's a lot that goes into that. First of all, understand as the yesod, there are some exceptional people who have the koach to simply learn Torah all day. An amazing thing. Almost all of them, not all, but almost all of them enjoy learning so much that they'd rather learn than play ball. So they're having their own distraction by learning. They love learning, and that's a madrega. You're supposed to be healthy in mind and body. You have to take care of your mind. Some Rebbeim would tell you that's okay in his moms, or you can recharge. Okay. Some people need it 20 minutes in a day. I'll tell you a story. I had a chaver I went to yeshiva with. I don't know if they still use the term now, but they had a guy who flipped out. They still use that term? Okay. This 30-year base medrash, he decides he wants to learn forever, become a Rebbe, and he was the nicest guy. Everybody loved this guy. He was the greatest basketball player in the yeshiva, a phenomenal guy. And I was talking to him once, we're both about 20, 21, we're talking about getting married, dating, whatever. And I said, do you plan to live in Eretz Yisrael? That he'd been learning there now for 4 or 5 years. He says, I can't. There's a lot of reasons people explain why it's difficult for them to live in Eretz Yisrael. He says, I'm addicted to the NBA. I've got to watch one NBA game a week. That's my escape. And you just can't get that in Israel. They didn't have anything 35 years ago where you could watch an NBA game. I assume they do by now, but anyway, I know they do. Fast forward 9 years. I'm here visiting people. I'm in Gula, and I bump into this guy, who, by the way, was a Rebbe in Torah Vodaas in New York for about 8 years after he got married. But I run into this guy in Gula. I said, Shimon, what are you doing here? He goes, I live here. You live here? What about your addiction to the NBA? We have cable. And every Thursday night, he has 20 guys over from yeshiva. They punch the walls. They have some herring and a l'chaim, and they enjoy watching an NBA game. And this guy is makarv hundreds of people to Torah mitzvahs. And his one Yetzer Hara, he turned into a way to be makarv these boys, to let them see that he's not the most crazy person in the world. He's not one-dimensional, but rather every person's entitled to have what, for a better word, we'll call their vice. If playing sports is your vice, I get you. There was a time when I lived in a different body. As a matter of fact, that's how Josh and I met. We were playing football together. There came a time when his youth overcame my talents. But the fact of the matter is that we both played sports at a very high level, and it was an enjoyment for us. We took care of ourselves and allowed us to go back and learn the next 3 days, the next 5 days. And escape is a necessary part of being a man. And remember, you have to escape because your wife's not going to let you. Right? Your wife's going to tell you we have to talk about all the problems. Until she happens to come to a shiur, maybe my wife will give it and explain to them that men need these escapes. It's not something that's necessary for peace of mind. So there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. They should be healthy. There are some types of distractions that are extremely, extremely destructive. Addictions, things of addiction are primarily the biggest ones, whether it's alcohol, whether it's gambling, or things that are far worse. If you have an addiction problem, you need to find something else as a release. It is the most self-destructive type of behavior you can engage. Yeah?
Do you think that while we engage in these activities, that we should have the mindset that we're doing it for, like, sharing your mind? I know there's some.
I gotta tell you, I can't relate to the question. I was never on that madrega. My wife once asked me, why do you have such a passion for football? Why do you love it, live it, breathe it? I said, when I am running down the field with a ball in my hand, it is the only time that I'm only thinking about one thing. I want to get in the end zone. That's the only thing I'm thinking about. And it clears my mind from all the other stuff that I'm thinking about all day. I've never been on the madrega that I'm playing football just so I can go back and learn better. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes.
You mentioned before, like, trying to make Kiddush Hashem. Like, how do you reconcile that with, like, being a lawyer and breaking down the witness? Like, do you feel bad? Like,
No. When someone's lying, I have commitment to emes. I would feel bad if I knew I could trip up a witness when it wasn't emes, because I'm good at what I do, and it's not hard. You get someone to tell. There's almost nobody in the world that can tell the exact same story 2 separate times. There's going to be little details that are different, and that's why trial lawyers do things like depositions and discovery and written questions, because you've got the guy's answers already in front of you, and the moment he deviates from something, you've got it. Because juries don't care who's right or wrong; they punish people that lie to them. So if you can paint someone as a liar because they forgot whether the car was gray or silver, So yeah, you don't use things to your advantage. It's not part of being yasha.
yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Are there certain instances where you're supposed to deviate from the halakha or what the Torah says? I'll give an example. I was talking to someone earlier, and we're talking about the idea of moving to Israel. I think it says somewhere in the Gemara that if someone wants to move to Israel, his mom lives with his mother, his parents don't want him to go, he's allowed to go anywhere. personally, that I find it bothering me a little bit to do something against your parents' will. It says that in the Gemara. Like if I was in that instance, I don't think I would follow the halakha. I'm just wondering, is that problematic? Like,
So first of all, that's a phenomenal madrega to be on, that you keep it of aim is on such a madrega. But I will tell you, the Torah gives us some parameters for that. The Torah tells us, "V'yashabshosai tishmaro, ish aviv v'imiv toro." It says those things, they juxtapose. Ish imo v'aviv toro, v'yashabshosai tishmaro. Listen to your parents, but keep my Shabbos. And we learn from that a halacha that if your parents tell you to be machal Shabbos, you don't listen. You have to ask someone competent whether the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael rises to that. I think many poskim would say yes. But it's beyond, it's above my pay grade. It's a complicated shiloh because again, we do have parameters when even though kibbud av aim is such an important mitzvah, there are certain rare exceptions where the Torah tells us not to listen. So you have to contact someone really competent in that area. It's not an easy thing to go off to the bookstore and find an art scroll to tell you when not to listen to your parents. Yeah.
Is it okay to put like a lot of work into parnasah if you say like this is what I love? Because like let's say you go to law school, you're a doctor, it takes a lot of effort, right? So the justification would be this is what I want to do, this is how I make parnasah.
So the 8 hours a day you do it normally isn't enough?
No, I'm asking you like it takes like you said you're required to make money, like how much, not how much, but like how much effort are you allowed to put into it, do you think?
So do I have time for one more piece? So I'll tell you a yesod about parnasa. Okay? You working an extra few hours is not going to make any difference. It's not just a Gemara. The Gemara says that Kadosh Baruch Hu decides how much parnasa you have. There's a Mishnah that I always thought I understood. The Mishnah says that Kadosh Baruch Hu gives everyone the parnasa that he needs. I always understood that to mean is that barring unusual circumstances like a plague, or like a war, or a tyrant government, people don't generally die of starvation. They might be hungry, they might not have as much as they want, but generally speaking, you can live off vegetation, fish, whatever it is, there is food around, unless there's something unusual going on. Water, you need water to live. That's why virtually every large city in the world was built on a body of water, because you needed water to live. There's lots of water around, lots of fresh water that you can drink to live. You need shelter? You can live in a cave. You can live in a tent. Hashem gives you what you need. You want to live in a 12-bedroom mansion? That's not something you need. That's indulgement. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying that's not something you need. That's the way I always understood that mission. I learned a Ramchal maybe 10 years ago, which told me I'd been learning this all wrong. He says there's a comma in the phrase. Hashem gives everyone the parnasa that he needs. And it's a different amount for every person. The idea of parnasa from Shemayim, listen and understand this idea. The idea of parnasa is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a range that every person is supposed to be in. And he says, if you get above that range, you're going to have a sudden car repair, you're going to have medical bills to bring you down to where the range is that you're supposed to be in. And if you have some bad things, intuitions more than you expected it to be, Hashem will cause some things to go your way to put you back in that range. And what is that range? That range is that you're supposed to have enough parnasa. You're able to sleep at night. You're not worried about how you're going to feed your family. But not so much that you stop davening properly and forget where it comes from. And the Ramchal brings a raya to this. He says, I don't know if most of you guys are old enough to probably have some experience with this firsthand with neighbors, friends. He says in every generation there's super wealthy people that lose their money. They make a bad business deal, whatever it is, they lose all their money. He said, but derech klal, those people are wealthy again 5 years later. So most people think, oh, because they're good at business, they're able to build up again. No. The Ramchal says, he says, because when a wealthy person loses all their money, they're ice mensch. They can't sleep. If Bill Gates woke up tomorrow with my money, he'd kill himself. By the same token, the Ramchal says if you have a poor person who wins the gyral, he wins the lottery, and he instantly becomes a millionaire overnight, the Ramchal says, b'derech klal, you'll see that that person is poor again in 5 years. Maybe he made some bad business decisions, whatever. The problem is when a poor person wins the lottery, his davening suffers. He stops thinking, I'm on easy street. I got more money than I ever dreamed I was going to have. I'm no longer looking to Shemayim for my parnasa. A person has to make hishtadlus. You have to make your efforts to earn a parnasa. But don't ever delude yourself and think that coming home at 9 o'clock at night instead of 5:30 is going to make you wealthier. It won't. And I'm telling you this from personal experiences that I've seen with myself, and I've seen it with my chaverim over the last 35 years. You don't make more money by working harder. You may make a few extra dollars one week. It gets compensated for somewhere else. You make your hishtadlus, and HaKadosh Baruch will make sure you get the parnasa that you're supposed to have. If Hashem wants you to be a gvir, so you can support all these great causes and donate millions of dollars to the size of buildings, you will have it, even if you're only working 8 hours a week, even if you're only working 6 hours a week. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want you working 12 hours a day, so you have no time to learn, you have no time to be with your family. It's not what He wants, and you're not going to make more money for it. Anybody else? This wasn't as much fun as I expected it to be. Yeah.
How do you like incorporate the concept of Ishtadu with what you just said, that it's kind of a predetermined range? Meaning, like, if you could have an option for a 50-hour-a-week job for more money or 40 hours for less, would anyone choose the 40 hours or less? And should you choose the 40 hours?
Some people would. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. Every person is different. Because like I said, I don't know what the nisyanis that person has. Maybe he needs to have more than his neighbor. Maybe that's a chesar in him, but he has that personality trait. It's not enough that I have 3 cars for 2 drivers. I need a 4th car in my driveway for 2 drivers. Maybe he's that kind of person. That's the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu created him. But don't think that you're going to get out of your range. Maybe that person's range is to work 50 hours so he has more. But you'll see over a period of years that you're working extra time. It doesn't give you more parnasa than you were supposed to have. In other words, if that person worked 40 hours, he'd have the same thing as if he worked 50 hours. It doesn't matter what job you take. Where are you going to be next year, 2 years later? What kind of rewards are there for the kind of job you're doing? Just want to make sure you end up where you're supposed to be. He only says that by parnasa. He doesn't say it by anything else. Yeah.
So why would someone choose a profession like doctor or lawyer, where it's obviously more demanding? They can get the same parnasa, and in many cases, I mean, doctor, okay, if you're saving lives, I understand, but then you're gonna learn less hours, and you're gonna be less available for your family. Rather, I work in a business, and I'm gonna make the same parnasa, and I have more time to learn, more time for my family.
Well, there's a lot of presumptions there which may or may not be true. Or Josh can tell you that I rarely work more than 25 hours in a week. Rarely. There was a problem at my son's day school a number of years ago. Their principal was leaving to take another position. Baltimore's a big city, one of the premier places that the Conklin can go to get a job. Here they have the Rosh Masifta position open. Every candidate in the world wanted that job, and they had 4 of them in the next 3 years. Wasn't going well. So I bumped into the person who runs that school, who I've known for many years. We were friends for a long time. And I said, so how's the latest principal search going? And he says, I think we're zeroing in on somebody. I said, that's good. I said, I have to tell you, I'm a little offended that you didn't contact me about the job. He laughs. You're going to give up your law practice? You could be 60 hours a week to run our high school? I said, well, that's your first problem. If I ran your high school, it wouldn't take me 60 hours a week. I run my law practice in 20 hours a week. The other 5 hours I actually have to work. I said, if I was running your high school, I'd run it in 15 hours a week. If you want to find some shlemazel who would take 60 hours to run it, you'll find it. And that ain't going to be me. To answer your other question, why did I choose to go into a profession that's so time-consuming? Like I said, number one, it wasn't that time-consuming for me. And number two, because by the time I was in 3rd grade, it was readily apparent to me of what I was good at. And what I was good at was solving problems and figuring out how to help people. And I enjoyed doing that. So it was my own Yetzer Hara that told me I could have done most of the things I do now without ever going to law school. But now I can do it legally and earn a parnasa doing it. And you know what else? When people come to me that need help and they don't have any money, I can choose to help them anyway. There's a lot of opportunities to do the things that I love, that I believe the Kodesh Baruch Hu gave me talents in. And I love going to work every day because of it. It's a good mixer for anybody. Money's great, but you have to love what you do for a living. Otherwise, it's really a verbal part. If you love what you're doing, you never go to work. Anybody else? All right. Everybody got a pen? Everybody got a pen?
Yep.
So I'm gonna give you my email address. Anybody has any questions, you're welcome to contact me. I would love you guys come back in the summer and say, hey, you know what? A couple of things that you said actually made a little bit of sense to me. Let's do a chabur over the phone and let's do some Zoom together, individually or with a cover or whatever it is. I'd love to get together. I have to tell you, as Rabbi Tessler told you, I come here many times over the years. You're an extraordinary group of people. For some reason, the people that gravitate to this yeshiva are extraordinary. And you're going to accomplish extraordinary things. I'd love to be a part of it. Keep in touch. It's David, then the letter E as in Edward, David E. Fink, F-I-N-K, at yahoo.com. You can tell how old I am. Yahoo, yeah, I believe it. It used to be one of those places that people who were too young for AOL got email addresses.
You don't know what AOL is.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Reach out.